First of which, let me introduce by saying that 6 or 7 months ago I was interviewing a man who was in his boardroom in Texas, where he presides over one of the largest food production companies in the world and sits atop an annual turnover of $10 billion, I think it was. And while we were talking, he interrupted me to say, do you know that you guys in Ireland have really stolen a march on the rest of the world in addressing the sustainability agenda? Sustainability for large food producers and those who are making investment decisions is of key importance, not just because you get that warm, fuzzy feeling inside when you watch that nice Saoirse Ronan ad, but because they like to see the numbers that prove that the investment is one that is going to be sustainable 5, 10, 15 years from now if they decide to locate here. And the programme or the project that has done that is Bord Bia's Origin Green. It is quite literally a world-beating programme of which there is a very significant element devoted to quantifying, to calibrating and making sure that we know how much food is going to waste, at what points in the food chain, and what can be done to prevent it. So with that, let me please introduce to you then Andrew Mullins from Bord Bia to talk a little bit more about it.
Just like to say thanks to Philip there for his kind words, and thanks to Odile and the Stop Food Waste team for bringing us along today and letting us be part of the discussion as well. So I guess we're all aware of the challenges that we face. So by 2050, the population is expected, and we know it's going to surpass 9 billion people. And with that, obviously, comes severe challenges, and we know what they are. So I guess, how do we feed the world? How do we feed this many people? So by 2050, we're going to need to double our food production with less land, water, and energy, while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So to put it out there, the challenge is significant for us all. So I guess collaboration and joined up thinking, and through events like today, will be very important moving forward. But I guess ultimately risk will ultimately be a key driver for food companies and people across the supply chain. So we see there very clearly one of the key risks is a food shortage crisis. And this is what people were thinking in the Global Risks edition only last year. So the challenge is out there, as we say. So what has happened is that sustainability, due to this risk, it's becoming part of commercial strategies. And where once large organisations were reacting to challenges and complying and defending their actions, what we've seen is quite a shift towards financial considerations and brand image. So the concept, I suppose, of sustainability has actually changed in recent times. And what we've seen is that organisations are becoming far more proactive about the argument and embracing sustainability, like Philip said. So this is the change we're beginning to see, and I suppose what's that coming around to is that reputation has become everything. So back in 1975 there, you'll see that in terms of intangible assets and an organisation's overall assets, tangible assets constitute 83% of their overall reputation. This is how they were judged. But in the space of 30 years, what we've seen is an enormous turnaround. And now 81% is related to intangible assets, such as reputation. So the change is very significant in a very short space of time. And really, what's driving this, the sustainability focus, is that it can protect your reputation and enhance an organisation's brand. It has the potential to drive efficiency as well. We're talking about security of supply for now and for the future, so the 2050 argument again. And again, it shows consumers that they're doing the work for them. And ultimately, when it comes to the consumer himself, so what we've seen recently is that environment and food security is top the list of what's on consumers' mind the most. So consumers are beginning to tune more and more into this. So we have a younger demographic, I suppose, of millennials who are starting to press the food waste argument, for example, more, and they're starting to question where their food is actually coming from. And what we've seen, I suppose, is a reaction to this. We've seen very large organisations throughout the world embrace this and take a hold of this and realise we need to be a part of this argument as well. And so the rationale, I suppose, whilst it's driven by the consumer, there's also a key business case. So this is an example of Nestlé's production output for the years 2002 to 2012, so a 10-year period. And what you'll see very clearly is that whilst their production volume has gone up significantly, all other areas have dropped. because they've embraced sustainability and they report on an annual basis. So they're committed to that. So we see their waste dropping, their water discharge dropping, greenhouse gas emissions are dropping as well. And I suppose for accountants out there, this is exactly what you want to see. So costs may be dropping, production is going up, and nobody would, in any organisation wouldn't like to see a graph like that. So I suppose for us, what we realised very quickly, we would have done some research there a few years ago, and obviously Ireland has a lot of natural advantages, and we're all aware of that, but it was about putting some metrics around that and developing a programme that could facilitate the needs of these organisations who are actually embracing sustainability. So what we're trying to do to Origin Green is become a world leader in sustainably produced food and drink. So ultimately, what we want is for every farm and food manufacturing business to sign up to the sustainability agenda. We're measuring what matters through accreditation and independent verification. And we're basing our performance on science, innovation, and best practice. So obviously you're all familiar with the quality assurance schemes, and they've been around for quite a long time. But what we've done is actually build sustainability metrics into those schemes. So I guess it just gives us a little more proof and a little more data-driven examples of what we're able to do in terms of sustainability. And at farm level, an example of this is that we've now carbon footprinted and audited over 43,500 beef farms. So that constitutes 90% of our beef exports. With regards to dairy, we've launched a national sustainable dairy assurance scheme at the tail end of last year. So that's going to cover our 18,000 dairy farms, and that'll be 100% of our milk production. And building upon that, we have further primary schemes on the way for pig meat, poultry, eggs, grain, and horticulture. So ultimately, what we want is to have sustainability metrics at every stage of the supply chain. Of course, at company level as well, what we've done is we've developed a sustainability charter. And what companies do, they'll decide on target areas. It's a very robust and data-driven plan. They'll agree a baseline period for them to measure their future progress. They'll set timelines and targets, and these are independently verified by the SGS group. And ultimately, what they'll also do is they'll report on this progress annually. So it's an ongoing process of self-improvement, continuous improvement, and data-driven metrics, which give us, I suppose, the proof as an industry of what we're doing. And again, it's setting plans, building proof, and by clearly communicating credentials. Ultimately, what we can do is we can save resources, we can build our own reputation in Ireland, and ultimately, as an industry, we can win business throughout the world. With regards to, in terms of the company level, I would have shown you farm already, but at company level, we suppose we would have launched the initiative in 2012. On Taoiseach Enda Kenny would have launched it at SIAL. And currently, a couple of years down the track, we've got over 380 companies registered as of today. That constitutes over 90% of our exports. 235 of these companies are working through workshops and plan development. We've got over 151 plans submitted at this stage. And of the 77 plans which are accepted and have been independently verified, this constitutes over 75% of our total exports of food and drink. So we've made fairly significant progress in a short space of time, if you will. And building upon that, next summer, we're going to be producing our first sustainability report. So whilst you see large organisations reporting on it annually, we're going to report on it annually as well. So we've committed to that, and that'll be available next summer. With regards to the target areas that companies look at, so there's three main target areas within the Origin Green plan at company level. So they look at issues of raw material sourcing. We're talking about supplier certifications and sustainability initiatives. We're also looking at manufacturing processes, and we're really talking about resource efficiency. So we're looking at areas such as energy emissions, waste, water, and indeed biodiversity. And we also have a social sustainability aspect as well to cover CSR-related initiatives. So we're looking at key areas such as health and nutrition, which has become obviously very topical lately, community initiatives, and further to that, employee well-being as well. So what we want is a fairly well-rounded sustainability plan that will cover all the areas that an organisation may encounter. And of course, as you'd have seen there under the manufacturing processes, to have waste was a key target area, and as a consequence of that, food waste will obviously be a key target area in Origin Green because we're talking about food and drinks companies. Ultimately, I suppose it's a little bit shocking when you see the food waste challenge that we have. So every year, 1.4 billion hectares of land, the equivalent to 28% of the world's agricultural area, or 200 Ireland, is used on food that is wasted. And that is just an incredible stat. The Food and Agriculture Organisation estimates that 1.3 billion tonnes of food is wasted every year. Ireland generates at least 1 million tonnes of food waste each year, which it may handle itself. And after America and China, as Philip reiterated earlier, food waste is the third largest contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, with 3.3 billion tonnes of CO2 per year, which is staggering. So clearly the challenge is out there. And whilst food production must double by 2050, the incredible thing is that we currently waste roughly around a third of our food. So the numbers don't really add up there. So responding to this, what we've seen in industry is that organisations such as Tesco, who are here today, M&S, we've seen Asda, and also Lidl and again Aldi, we've seen large retailers embracing the food waste challenge because they know, as well as we all know through those numbers, that this can't go on and something has to change. So what we've seen is through Origin Green, I suppose, is our idea is to prevent food waste from ever happening. We work very much at company level. And I suppose if we can prevent it before it ever gets to retail shelves and the stores, we'll be doing our job. So what we anticipate is that through robust data-driven sustainability plans, this will enable our food and drinks companies to have a better handle on their overall production. And once they have a better handle on that, they can start to prevent unnecessary output. So from our aim, we'd like to prevent food waste at the factory floor or before it ever gets out. So that's our ultimate aim. To reiterate the target areas that we've seen earlier and how this will quantify towards the food waste challenge. So the Origin Green programme is not a short-term programme, it's a long-term programme. We're trying to change behaviour and attitudes. And in terms of food waste within the raw material source, and what we're seeing is organisations embracing smarter packaging, starting to reuse the resources in a more clever way, improve storage, which can obviously give food a longer shelf life. In the manufacturing area, we're starting to see organisations reduce poor finishing potentially to cut out food waste. We're seeing an embracing of anaerobic digestion, composting. All of these things will reduce emissions and reduce water. And again, ultimately what we'd like to do is to send zero waste to landfill. And again, also in target area 3, in the social side, we've seen organisations link up with schools and spread the word about food. And we have a food dudes programme ourselves to kind of re-educate our young citizens. We've also seen community initiatives like the Feed the 5,000 initiative, which would happened earlier this year. We have food banks now, and we're also re-educating consumers as well. So these are the kind of targets that our own companies are setting to tackle food waste, and in a long-term way. Just some examples here of how organisations are tackling food waste in Origin Green. So Fresh Waste, which was initially founded by the Kerry Group, an Origin Green verified member. So they produce packaged sandwiches and wraps, and they've around 200 employees. And True Green Business, who work with the EPA there, what we've seen is they did an analysis of their site, and they realised that waste produced revealed that 112 tonnes of bread crusts were being sent for composting, costing nearly $7,500 to that organisation each year. And what they quickly realised, Green Business, I suppose through a fresh pair of eyes, is that it was possible to sell these bread crusts to a manufacturer to produce breadcrumbs. So ultimately what we've seen is a $7,500 saving in the waste. There was actually an income from the sale of the crust at €8,000, and so there was a net benefit to the company of just over 15,000. So these are the kind of win-win situations we like to see within Origin Green. And of course, there's strong incentives for organisations to redistribute food waste through food exchanges. So ultimately, it'll reduce the cost of waste. It has a positive CSR to the social sustainability aspect. And what we now have is we now have an infrastructure to redistribute good quality food waste. So we have the Be a Food Bank and Food Cloud are here today. And we also have the Smile Resource Exchange as well. So what we actually have now is a network to redistribute this food waste, which is very important and something we may not have had before. Where food waste is unavoidable, what we may utilise is innovative technology such as Dairygold's anaerobic digester. And what the organisation needed was a treatment plant that could reliably treat powdered milk and cheese waste as well as high-strength salty waste. So this was food waste that was unavoidable and it could not be redistributed. What the digester does, it produces biogas that is converted into renewable energy, and a portion of this is used in a dual fuel boiler to produce hot water. Further, the remaining biogas is used for supplementary heating requirements in the plant boiler or turned into a waste gas flare. And ultimately, the anaerobic digestion offers a simple, efficient, and low maintenance solution, which will pay them back over a long period. So there's severe long-term benefits to that. And ultimately, through Origin Green, what we'd like to see is no food waste being sent to landfill. That's our ultimate aim. We find it unnecessary, and we'd like to tackle that as much as we possibly can. I think 2014, despite what Philip says, has seen a bit of a sea change, even from our own consciousness and from our own companies in terms of awareness of food waste. So obviously you had the Waste Watchers program, and some of our top chefs are really embracing the challenge and how even at household level they can reuse food waste. And this is translating back to the companies that we have. I've also seen initiatives like Feed the 5,000, and again, very much a company and agricultural level. We've seen a more an embracing of misshapen vegetables through retailers as well. So that has a knock-on effect on the agricultural industry as well. Ultimately, I think there's 4 key methods to tackle food waste. If we can prevent it in the first instance, we're doing our job in terms of Origin Green at company level. If it can't be prevented, we need collaboration through the likes of the Be a Food Initiative and Food Cloud, and again working with retailers to help them forecast and cut out food waste in the supply chain. We need innovation. So like Dairygold's anaerobic digester, we need technology. So there's some very exciting things happening in terms of technology, even at a basic level. So smartphones are being embraced through the Food Cloud app. We've seen the development of even fridges that people know when their food is going to go off. So there's some exciting things down the track which hopefully will have a major influence on how consumers buy food. And I think we all need a little bit of re-education. So the work that Odile and the Stop Food Waste team are doing has been really strong. And again, Philip's Waste Watchers TV show was very strong in terms of just showing people how they can reuse food. And I think there's an education level that we all need to re-embrace to tackle food waste. So ultimately, through Origin Green, we like to prevent food waste, but we'll collaborate as much as we possibly can with other organisations to tackle this long-term problem. And Origin Green is a long-term sustainability initiative. It's going to be here to stay for a while, so let's try and tackle the issue now. So thank you very much for your time.